Okay, so we are going to start out by drawing our fashion figure or croquis with an 8.5 by 11 piece of copy paper, which is easily accessible. We're also going to use a mechanical pencil, a ruler. I also like to use a micron pen. This one's a 03. I use a kneaded eraser, and if I make a mistake, I like to pull out my jelly roll, my white jelly roll. So the first thing we're going to do is draw out a 10-inch line vertically on our paper. Okay, I'm going to leave about a 1/2 inch on the bottom and on the top. And I'm going to mark a little line along each inch. Now, the reason why I like to use a mechanical pencil is because it forces me to sketch lightly. If you don't sketch lightly, then if you make a mistake and you erase it, your paper is more than likely going to be scarred or dented, and you might even see a little bit of that pencil lead still on the paper from that. So this helps me to be able to sketch lightly so my artwork looks better in the end. So over here, I'm just going to start marking each line with a number. So just counting 0 all the way up to 10 so that I make sure that everything is placed where it's supposed to be. Okay, so each one of these sections is called a head because this is a stretched figure and this is going to be 10 heads tall. Now, the regular normal human proportions are about 8 inches tall, or not 8 inches, 8 heads tall. But for the fashion figure, just like with the models, these figures are elongated and thinner. It's just a little bit more of an elegant look that is the fashion expectation. It doesn't mean it's necessarily more beautiful. There are plenty of ways to draw figures that are gorgeous in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but this is kind of the industry standard. So we're going to start by sketching an oval for the head. Just like that. And it goes from 0 to 1 at the chin. Now from 1 to 2, right in the center, we're going to square out a line, and it's going to be about 1.5 inches in width, okay? So I can use my fingers and measure that to get kind of an approximate measurement. And that's where I'm going to place my shoulders, right there. Now, if I were to take this head and I were to slice it in 4 vertical slices that were fairly equal, and I extended those lines down, that would be about the width of the neck that I usually draw. I also like to add a little bit of a tendon right here. Just softens that squared line a little bit. And if you notice, my sketch lines they're messy, they're not perfect. I will be inking everything in and then erasing it, and then everything will look so much nicer at the end. So between 2 and 3, about 1/4 of the way down is the bottom of our bust line, okay? So to draw out the shape of the bust, each breast is going to be kind of like a teardrop shape, okay? You don't have to draw them all the way to the top of the teardrop. You can if it helps you. But chances are they're not going to meet in the center because these are especially thin figures. Now, along 3, we have the waistline. And the waistline is about the width of a head. So if you want to just imagine that line on either side of the head going down, that shows you how narrow we want that waist. Now I'm going to take a line from the center of the shoulders, and I'm just going to curve it down towards the waist. Now the crotch line is about 4 1/8. I'm going to square out a line and curve some lines upwards. And then the hip line is going to be about the width of the shoulders. Right out from that crotch, okay? So we could just directly curve a line out, but because I want to make sure I get the right shape in here, I'm going to put the 2 different sections of the hips. So we've got this upper portion of the hips that comes directly out from the waist, like that, and then we've got this right there that touches this outer line. So now I can follow those shapes, and I've got a really nice hip line that more or less looks pretty anatomically correct with these 2 different areas. So now that I've got the hip width in there, I can go ahead and draw where the placement of the arms will be. I like to do the hips first because if I just draw the arms first, I tend to draw them straight down, and then there's no room for the hips or the legs to fit in there. So out from 3 is where I'm going to place the elbow, centered along that line. And then I'm just going to draw a line from the center of the shoulders to that elbow. And then the crotch is where the wrist is going to hit, right there. So I'm going to draw a line from the elbow to the wrist. And there we've got the placement of our arms. Now, from this area all the way down to the top of the knee is going to be right at that 6 line. So I'm going to sketch these knees in there, and they're going to be about the same size as your shoulders or your elbows. So now what I can do is I can curve a line out and down to the knees, and that will give us this nice curve of the pelvic bowl. Now in reality, the inner corner or the center of these thighs has a little bit of a muscle structure there. So if it helps you to get the shape of those legs, you can draw this elongated kind of football shape that hits the bottom of the upper hip and the top of the knee. just gives a little bit of a muscle structure right there on the inner thigh. Now that same shape I use to create the bicep. And then I like to use a baseball bat shape for the lower arm. Just basically straight lines. And then I can follow those shapes down. Now for the bust line, we've got the nipples are going to be facing slightly outward. You don't want them staring at you. That's freaky and it's not anatomically correct. And we've got this little hint of a rib cage under there. And you want to also make sure that you are accommodating the shape of this rib cage. So sort of curve out. If you were to draw that out, it would look like this underneath there. Okay, fingertips are going to hit at 5 or a slight bit below. And I like to draw them with this sort of lantern shape that I then do a cross section of, vertically and horizontally. And then our ankles are going to be down at 9. So tiny little ankles. And I'm going to curve a gentle line from the knees to the ankles. Now I'm going to add the structure of the calf muscle. That's going to be centered on 7. It's the length of a head, but a little bit more narrow. Now I can come in under the knees and in under the calves. And then the outer lines are just gentle lines. For the feet, those toes are going to hit right at that 10 line, and about a third of the way up is a point of reference that we're going to use for the shape of the feet. So this is going to be kind of similar to the hands in that it's almost like a diamond shape or a lantern shape, but that cross section, the vertical or the horizontal cross section, is going to be along this line. So it's going to be like that. Okay, now my hand's sticking in my papers. So at this point, let's go ahead and start working on the face. I'm going to do a horizontal cross section, and right here is going to be the center of that first eye that we create. And as we draw that eye, we need to keep in mind that we want each eye to look symmetrical to the other. We also need at least an eye width in the center. But I'm going to erase that because it always looks a little freaky when I do that. Okay. So that's the eye line. The hairline is about a third of the way from the top of the head to the center of the head. So that's about where it's going to start. And the eyebrow is like a fourth of the way from the center of the head to the top, so about right there. Now from the center to the chin, a third of the way down and a tiny bit below that is our nose. And then the mouth is going to be center between the nose and the chin. And then I might have to add a little bit more length on the chin. It depends on the face. So our ears are going to start up at the eyebrow line and end at the nose, right there. And then I do add a little bit more width at the top of the head for hair. Now I can add a little bit of an eyebrow that has an arch that comes above this eyebrow line and on the outside of this center of the eye line. And then it's going to end at the center of the eye down below. And I'm going to try and replicate that shape on the other side, starting at the center of the corner of the eye. Sorry, corner, not center. It's going to lift up and the arch is going to come out there. Here we've got an iris right there, and an iris right there. And then for the nose, I like to draw a little bit of a nostril above that line. And then the outer corner of the nostril, do a little bit of a hint of that. And then the tip of the nose, I like to draw. For the mouth, I like to sort of block in a shape so I can see the size of what I want before I draw in the shape. I think that's as wide as I want it. And I'll draw that little divot at the top, Cupid's bow. And the outline of the lips. I can already see that I would like to add a little bit more cheekbone and jawline. So I'm going to do that at this point. Just a little bit more width for a cheekbone on this side. And a little bit more structure for that jaw. Okay, so we've basically got a hairline already in place. And now I just need real simple hairdo. Maybe she's got her hair slicked back and it's just falling behind her ears. For the hands, we've got this nice cross section. It's going to come in handy in creating the fingers. So just above this little cross, that's where I'm going to draw this little arrow on both sides. And that's going to be our split for our thumb, which goes almost 2/3 of the way down for the bottom half. And then our fingers. So there's one. And then we can possibly see a second right next to it. That's about all we're going to see right now. I'm going to try and replicate this over to the other side. keeping in mind that we've got 3 joints on our fingers, but usually these last 2 joints sort of follow the same line. So really you can just worry about 2 breaks in those fingers right there, if that makes sense. So now, let's see, we need a collarbone, which would go just below that shoulder line. We need a little bit of a softening of this shoulder tip. I don't like it to be super pointed right there, so I like to kind of cut that out a little bit. We need this inner bending of the elbow. We could use a belly button about 3 1/3 or 1/4 of the way down. Knees. And maybe the outline of her shoes. So she's in this one, she's wearing like some stilettos. So I think that is pretty good. So let's start inking her in. Oh, and let me show you those stilettos. Just like that. Okay. Now, when we ink in, this is not like our sketching. The technique is going to be straighter lines, and we're going to use our whole arm and our stomach muscles a little bit more and keep those smoother. Now we can still make mistakes. We've got a nice Jelly Roll white pen to cover those if we make a mistake, but for the most part, we want to keep our lines as perfect as we can. So I'm going to start from the top down. And I like to think about the direction that the hair is going when I'm drawing these. So her hair is kind of like gelled and slicked. Now for the shape of the nose, keep in mind you don't want to outline everything. Otherwise, it's just going to be too much. So if you're not comfortable with drawing noses, leave it blank for now. It's better to have no nose there than to have one that's super weird and awkward and distracting. Also for the inside of the ear, you can just sort of draw like a little shell or circular shape. Don't outline a whole lot. I like to add an eyelid. I like to outline the whole eye sometimes if she's wearing like eyeliner. And a little bit of an under eye area. I also like to do a couple of tendons lines for the neck. And her head is pretty much done. Can move on to everything else. Around the bust line, going out to the arm, I like to draw a little bit of a curve, like that. And to do it on the other side. Now please keep in mind your first croquis are going to look hideous. That is just part of the journey. Mine looked hideous too when I first started out. So be patient with yourself. Allow yourself to draw some really ugly ones. You're not going to learn this without doing that. So draw some ugly croquis, and then you can burn them once you get better at it. So keep practicing. If you drew one croquis a day, you would get better super fast. So keep that in mind. Everyone has to start somewhere. And art, just like everything else, like talent can only get you so far. If you are willing to work on it and work hard, and even work harder than those around you, you will progress so much more quickly. And the talent, you will realize, is not necessary because you've learned and you've memorized and you've become comfortable with the parameters of proportion and shading and color and those things that wow people who are not artists themselves and just think, man, how can they do that? But these things can be learned. So now that I've got that, I think I can start erasing. Ooh, should have taped my paper down. Okay, I think I will add just a little bit of lines around her belly. And she is finished. You can also add, details for the shoes if you still want to put those in there. Maybe a little point of the shoe. I think she worked out rather well. And from this croquis, once you've created your first one, you can actually take this and slide it underneath another fresh sheet of paper. And I don't know if you can tell from this video, but I can see her outline. So I can take this and I can draw a dress design over the top of it. So let's say I want to have some sort of gown like this, maybe with tie on the end. I can already see that figure underneath and just design from here. And it is such a great thing to have. And that really didn't take us that much time, but you can use that croquis for as long as you would like. And here we have this lovely dress design. It's not great, but it does show you what you can create from just that basic first croquis. Okay, so keep practicing, try new things, memorize these proportions. If you memorize them, you will be so much further ahead than most people, and you will blow their minds if you sit down and draw this. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this.